So here we are with this Honda Harmony again. And I don't know what it is, but there is water trapped in the fuel lines or in the tank or somewhere within the fuel system that keeps finding its way into the carburetor. So I'll get this thing all drained out and put the plug back into the bowl, fire it up, it'll run fine, and then it seems like a couple hours later I'll go back and try and start it and it won't start. Sure enough, more water in the carburetor. Gonna have to deal with that. 2, I've already got this machine running, as you guys saw in the last video. That's kind of the issue. The carburetor is idling funny. I don't know if it's due to the water or anything, but I've got this carb kit from Amazon that I'm going to throw on this. It came with a bunch of other stuff. The only thing that needs to be replaced is the carburetor, and I could probably replace the gaskets just because. But I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It's a pretty simple process to take the carburetor off of one of these. All you need is a 10mm wrench and socket, and you can pretty much take apart a Honda almost all the way to the core. So the first order of business is to take off the outer part of the air filter cover. Comes out just like that. And we have filter, which is still good. A little stained, but it's fine. And don't lose that. So, as I said, 10mm wrench or socket. You have 2 10mm nuts. And then also on these you have a 10mm bolt right there. And then you just take off the inner part of the airbox cover. You're gonna have a PCV line here. It comes off just like that. Now, here's the tricky part. Some of you guys will look at this thing and realize that it's kind of daunting if you've never messed with one of these before. They're not that bad. In order to remove one of these the easiest way possible, this back linkage comes off very simple. But all you're gonna do is just move this part of the butterfly back, but moving it back like that. And I'm just gonna get a pair of pliers back there, lift it off. Now here you have a spring. Just very carefully pull that up and out, let it sit aside just like that. Now this kit comes with the new fuel lines. We are going to replace this one because it's kind of dry rotted. So these Honda clamps here are kind of annoying, but all you have to do is just kind of finagle them around. Eventually you'll get them back far enough so you can undo that. And this model has a automatic fuel shutoff valve installed. So when you go to turn on your choke, leaves the fuel on, but when you go to the off position on one of these, it shuts it off. So it is off, but we are going to dribble a little bit of fuel out of this line. That's okay. But just take it off. So now here's the tricky part that hems up people when they take apart one of these carburetors. You're not going to be able to get this linkage off this way without bending it or finessing it. And you can see it's already been bent a little bit from people doing that in the past. What you have to do is take these 2 bolts out. And even if your mower has the different fuel shutoff valve, the manual one, it's still basically the same thing. You're going to want to take off this whole piece here so you can move this around. And that's going to allow you to pull that linkage out without destroying it or mangling it. So I like to call this the Honda sandwich. These are the mass of gaskets that Honda likes to use on their carburetors. So the first one on this particular engine is this big gasket. Then we have the carb itself, as well as the spacer, which I'm going to have to probably remove that at the bench. But you can see now there's enough play and slop in this to get the carburetor out without too much fuss. That's how you do it. Don't screw with it any other way. That's the easiest way to get it out. And there's the carburetor. So I'll meet you guys at the bench because we're going to use this carburetor to prepare the new one. But all you need to do this, like any other Honda, 10 millimeter. Simple as that. Now we're already got a problem here. So I did know that there was an issue with corrosion in this carburetor when I took it apart last time. But you guys can see all those bubbles in there, that's water. So what I'm gonna do now at this point is turn my compressor on. I'm going to remove and disconnect the fuel tank, pour all that fuel into a secondary container, see if there's no water or anything inside of that, blow out all the fuel lines that are on this engine. So to stop the fuel and not dribble a bunch of it everywhere, just do this. These little pliers are really handy. That's probably tight enough. Don't really want to go too tight, but same thing with this little line here, just like that. And now these top covers in the fuel tank is pretty easy to remove. Just one screw on these particular engines. Comes right out. That'll let us remove this guy here. Of course, with that out of the way, we can now unbolt or undo these 3 nuts. So this also gives you access to the recoil, which for us is fine. We don't got to worry about this. The main thing is now we can remove the whole gas tank. We still got to undo that line, but you guys can see it's basically going to come right off. Simple as that. So now let's see if this will cooperate. Spider check. Looks clean. Not bad. A little bit of dribblage, but that's okay. And now with that off, we can really inspect everything else in here. This fuel line, I believe the kit came with a new one, so we're gonna replace that for sure. All right, so I've got my trusty air nozzle, and we're going to move this around, line it up there, put my safety glasses on, and point this fuel line a different direction. I don't know if the camera picked that up, but probably good enough. Let's empty this tank out and see what's in it. So my semi-clean secondary container is repurposed kitchen hardware. So I'm just going to take the cap off of the tank, and we're just going to dump this in. Yeah, there's some water in there. We're going to let it set for a minute. See all that at the bottom? That's all water. Everything else is fuel, but yeah, there is definitely water in the tank. So I just blew the tank out. There was a little bit of water in there, and I saw it with the residual fuel, the bubbles in it. At least I'm assuming it was water. Shook it all out now. I think we're okay. I really blew the hell out of it with the air hose. Really, all we need to do with this carburetor is there's going to be the linkage and that standoff that we're going to have to use with the replacement. But first, we've got to make sure that the replacement carburetor is in fact the same carburetor. So, that's the general look over. Fuel elbow is pointed the right direction. There we go. That linkage, that valve linkage here is good. It's got the spring on it like it should. This one looks to be the same. I think we're good there. Holes are similar. It's probably not a big deal. But all we're going to do right now is pull that linkage out, stick it in there where it should be, lean that up against the dirty fuel. Now I've got to get this spacer off. Oh, that is on there tight. Might need this gasket after all. Let's see what kind of condition it's in. Oh man. Yeah. So we're going to replace this gasket. I'm not even going to bother screwing with that. In the kit, they included this little doggy bag of new gaskets. They are not very high quality, I might add. So grab the spacer. See which one's which. Looks like this is going to be the winner. Only the finest. So yeah, this one's the right one. So with the carburetor, the new one leaned over, we can see which one's which. This looks to be the correct gasket, so that's where it's going to go. And then if you peel this back, you can see it's a Honda thing with the way that they make these carburetors. You can see the way it's grooved out in there. So that's all supposed to be like that. So now that that is done, we've established that this is the same carburetor. Now put the spacer back on. We're going to stick this back onto the engine. So what we can do first is put the spacer. There is another gasket here which is still in good condition. I'm not going to worry about changing that. Put the spacer on and the gasket. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm going to change out this grubby old fuel line. You got to be really careful not to damage this line here, this electrical line that goes to the coil. It's your ground. But I'm just going to undo this little clip here and pull that out. The same thing, finagle the clip around, get it off as best we can. This line's messed up anyways. There we go. So we can see with the new one, I'm just going to install that little retainer clip there and kind of put it back in the same way. You can see this one's got these different little clips on it. These are actually far superior, but all I'm going to do is just connect it onto the nipple. Just like that. It's on. And now, just going to put that back on. Just like that. Grab our other clip here, put that on the fuel line, push that back at least 1 inch, as well as the linkage which fell off. And we're just going to slide that back in where it's supposed to go, just like that. It's kind of hard to do this one-handed. Things I do for you guys. Right, you just move her back on and in place. There we go. Everything's where it should be. What I'm going to do right now is connect the fuel line to the carb. We're going to bolt this thing back in place, get everything put back together, minus the tank. So while we have all of this off, you all can better see this. We're going to do the same thing. Move that around and in place, and the little spring is back right there. So all I'm doing right now is just actuating the throttle. The throttle's moving like it should. Here's the choke. Perfect. So let's get this pig stab back together. So I've checked over everything, gave everything a really good once over before installing this. Remember, you have this PCV line. It's got to go back on. Let's see if I can do that one-handed, and I can. Look at that. So you just line up the studs. Back on. There is going to be a little bit of tension on this side. That's normal. Don't try and reinvent the wheel trying to figure that out. In fact, if it doesn't do that, you're probably not getting a good seal. So you'll want to check, make sure you're lined up with everything properly. So the trick here with this, I know this tool really well. You don't want to cinch down the hell out of these with an impact. I know this tool well. It's got a variable trigger. That's enough. Just two smacks of the hammer inside it, and that's plenty tight. So just to prevent any debris from going in there. Gas cap's back on. Put this beauty cover. And then you got these little nubs. Basically just allow you to reinstall it. That's enough. So I'm just going to put some gas in it. So I've looked over here. No fuel leaking anywhere. So that's good. Now the way these start is you just push the choke all the way up. They start without the blade on. That's what this is for right here. Let's see what happens. Even idle's good. So I'm happy with that. It does actually run a bit better than with that other carb on it. That other carb had a bunch of corrosion inside of the jets, very common with Honda and Honda clone engines. And I couldn't get that center jet out anyways, so unfortunately, or fortunately, this was actually the better move, was just to replace the carb. Everything else is good. Everything else in this machine's been looked after. The air filter is in good shape. The oil is actually like clean, like it was just changed. And it's got this service sticker on it from one of the local mower shops, and I don't even think they're around or in business anymore. I think COVID killed them off, but the spark plug is like brand new. I already had that out in the other video. It's an NGK, so no sense in changing that out for an inferior Chinese-made plug. Those NGKs are really good plugs. But anyways, this thing runs great. It's going to make somebody a decent lawnmower for a fraction of what these cost new.